Welcome back to Ticketmaster, or Ticket Disaster, everyone. In this part, we're going to continue the conversation on Ticketmaster and everything that has gone down with them over the last few months. We've already done a recap on the situation and looked at some of the potential issues the platform has dealt with. If you missed that, make sure to go back and check it out on our YouTube channel. Now it's time to take a look at how we could be avoiding issues like this. Maurício, what are some of the potential solutions? How can fintech help? How could blockchain potentially solve some of these potential issues?
So I think one of the larger issues that's underneath all of this is the ability to actually identify who's buying. The fan, if it's an actual fan, if it's being credentialized by a fan club or something to that effect. So I think bots have a very hard time proving that they're someone, right? So if you can have someone that is either the artist or related to the artist, the organization around the artist, to actually issue credentials to the fan club or to the Swifties, and they can use that to leverage like a window for shopping or even the number of tickets. It would be very hard to actually implement that in a multitude of robots. I mean, it would be harder for robots to actually go and circumvent that device. That said, that is not the only way to deal with that. So I think if we think about even creating alternative forms of purchasing, so we had credit cards, debit cards, virtual cards, but you could also accept cryptocurrencies or stable coins that go directly from a wallet to another as a peer-to-peer transaction. So that would probably help with the bottleneck on the other paying systems. I'm not saying that this is the only way to do it, but I think there will be other ways to use other payment rails to actually facilitate that. And because you can actually automate the atomic swap between the ticket and the money purchased, it's just one asset coming one way, the money coming the other, and that's it. There's no aught in the middle. So all of that kind of makes it easier for you to actually identify the person, make the swap between the two assets, I mean the payment and the ticket, and then you can go and redeem the ticket at a later date or in the booth. You know, it's all sorts of post-processing that can be done once the person has the ticket or the NFT, the corresponding NFT. So I think these are some of the ways that I see the problem being mitigated, but I think there's still an overarching problem of this being a monopoly.
Yeah. I think if we make the assumption that a fan values a ticket as a high-value transaction, right? So you mentioned Glastonbury, for example. So if you really want to go to Glastonbury and the tickets cost hundreds and hundreds of pounds, and actually if you do have a queue window of a month or several weeks, for example, then surely you should then be incentivized to provide enhanced KYC in order to go through the transaction. And there's all sorts of different things that you can do, like you mentioned crypto. There's also in the open banking space, if you make the transaction via open banking, you can use the account record that you get from open banking to verify that person is a person and that person is real. But even outside of embedded finance, I mean, if you just look at very basic kind of KYC tech that we have in fintech, like video ID or Face ID or Touch ID or just any of the basic stuff that we use. Proof of life. All of that, not only does all of that exist, I mean, a few years ago, a lot of that technology was very bespoke and very expensive, but now you can buy those in as a service software and capability where you pay per call. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is that I can't understand why they haven't looked at this technology. I can't understand why they're not changing the way that they think about these transactions. I mean, this isn't buying a t-shirt online, right? This is a much higher value transaction, and therefore people should be, and have proved to be through the verified fan system, willing to spend time. So Ticketmaster should be rewarding that with better tech, and they're not doing it.
I agree.
David, everyone likes to think about embedded finance as kind of like the savior of financial services. Is there anything about embedding finance in this particular instance that would make it easier? Like, is there anything about the fact that you've got Ticketmaster and payment spaces separately? Is that creating an issue, or?
Well, it's interesting. It comes back to how easy it is now to spin up virtual cards, right? And that is probably one of the reasons why the bots are able to operate the way that they do. And through open banking, I think you can solve some of that problem. I'm pretty sure someone would be able to write a bot that can can do the payment initiation. I'm sure that would be possible, but it would certainly slow down the process and give Ticketmaster a hell of a lot more data that they can take action on to do it. But then on the other hand, you would then just need to say the only way to buy this ticket is to use open banking and not use credit cards or debit cards at all, and that opens up all sorts of different problems there. There might be a crypto element, I think, that might make it better. You could also do things like embedded insurance, but I'm sure an insurer wouldn't want to touch this with a barge pole right now, given how
now they have track record. So
yeah, exactly. But yeah, I would say it's mostly around the payment section where embedded finance can add the most value.
And I think you mentioned open banking, right? I think the whole core tenet of open banking is use the data across the financial system as a whole. And there are some services that are actually using open banking data plus behavioral data in the devices to actually see whether the purchase behavior is a human pattern or is a bot pattern, right? The speed in which we move the mouse, the patterns that we use to move the mouse, the way we handle even the cell phone itself, they can measure that in the biometrics. So I think it's really interesting to see some of these fintechs that are actually working on these things in financial services apply to the ticketing industry if this is the case. We know that doing things that are very, very sophisticated and require a lot of computational power at scale is super hard. But if the cost of having a fan experience be better, I think it's worth trying some of these things. Again, it comes down to, is there incentives for that? And I think, this lawsuit is probably going to provide enough incentive for that to change.
Have we seen any good example, and we've talked about lots of different solutions or options here, have we seen any good examples of this actually being practiced anywhere else? Obviously, we're being critical of Ticketmaster, but is anyone doing this right?
I think there's, in the crypto space, again, not at that scale, right? But we have seen a few bands issue a whole collection of an album with different tiers, right? The first one I can recall, I think, was Kings of Leon, maybe a couple of years ago. It was the first, they had maybe 18 golden NFTs, and those were going for tens of thousands of dollars, and it would give you lifetime access to meet and greet in their shows. So that is one tier. And then there were other tiers where you got a vinyl at home that would come with the NFT, and the other one was just a van premiere of the album or future albums or something to that effect. This is all fan experience. This has nothing to do with ticketing, but it has everything to do with fan experience. And again, it has everything to do with the proximity between the artist and the fan, which right now, in this particular example, there is a massive intermediary making a ton of mess. So I think if I can point to a trend, and I'm not even talking about music NFTs that we've spoken about at the show, but I think there's a lot of opportunity, and especially in the way that fans connect to the artists, but also how artists reward the fans with better experience. And that is hopefully what the music industry is going to embrace.
I'm sure there are a lot of startups out there that would say that they've solved some of this problem, and it's such a complicated value chain that there's all sorts of different parts of it that you can disintermediate and do something really interesting. I wonder, Ticketmaster has been around for so many years. I wonder how much of their technology is actually now quite commoditized and could be relatively easy to pull out and bring something new. But it is extremely complex. You've got lots of stakeholders, all with vested interests, and a huge cost base to run these shows.
Yeah. How do you lift everything that's being implemented? It's now legacy tech that is in every venue around the world that is now connected to the same beaten system that's been running since, late 80s. So it's really hard to actually uplift from that. But again, if the fan experience starts to be the core tenet of the ticketing industry, there will be incentives for that to change, and maybe a disruptor comes in with a better fan experience, providing more value to the artist, provide great experience to the UX for the fans, and then Ticketmaster was going to have to either do something, buy or kill them, or get on with the times or get disrupted. So there is a lot of space, and this is completely free advice.
So far we've discussed the issues and some of the potential solutions, but I think for the last part of the show, I'd like to focus on the future and what we think the main takeaways are from this situation. So, how should Ticketmaster have gone about this, David? If you were in charge, what would you have done?
I think it's really difficult to understand where Ticketmaster's incentives really lie. They're not standing up for their customers. They clearly are spending a hell of a lot of money integrating their system into the value chain and making it as indispensable as possible, but investing almost nothing in the fan experience and trying to set up a better experience for their customers. So it's really difficult to know what they should be doing. But I can tell you the great thing about this is that because of how high profile this disaster has been, and the regulatory impetus in the US looking into this might be the very first time that people start to write regulation that demands that software, because don't forget, this is not just, I don't think this is just the events industry. I think this is about software as well in general, and how terrible. I mean, who's tried to contact Facebook customer service, for example? I mean, it's just impossible. I have, believe it or not, it's impossible to get through to anyone. And this is the problem, I think, that software has, that it has a duty to its customer to do better. So hopefully this might have ramifications for the entire software industry.
Fingers crossed. Maurício, what do you think are main learnings here?
I think if this whole lawsuit goes in to the extent that it sounds it's going to, I think we're going to learn a lot more about the inner workings of not only the industry, but this player particularly. So then I think a proper assessment, post-mortem of this will be done in front of the cameras, and we'll have access to some of that. So I think I'm hoping this lawsuit goes in. That's what I'm saying. Because of the learnings, not because I want Ticketmaster to be punished. I think we all learn about the industry a lot more if that is the case. Remember, we're dealing with an artist that lost the rights to their own songs and re-recorded all of the records so that she would own them back again. So she can go the distance, right? And I think she will. That said, looking forward, I think, again, I believe that crypto would allow us to do better identity management. There are all sorts of ways, from NFTs, from soul-bound tokens, that would lend themselves well, integrated maybe with open banking and other sorts of data. I think the ability to disintermediate all of these industry players between the artist and the fan is there. We're seeing loads of examples. There's like Song XYZ, there's Royale, there's Watery Music. A bunch of them are actually just cutting the middleman from the label to the distributor. So yeah, I think the path forward is to that proximity. And obviously that requires a lot of learning and experience from the fan base itself, which is, it takes a little bit of time. But the experiments are there, and they're being very interesting to witness the way they're reshaping the music industry as a whole. So while you're talking about the software industry, I think what crypto actually is doing for the artists is actually, getting you closer to your audience. And that is probably, the closest we'll see that happening. So I'm just pushing for that. And obviously, if the learnings from the lawsuit show us anything that is relevant, maybe we'll then figure out a way for Web3 to actually come in and help, or better software to come in and help. But I think it's imperative that we see that go through.
I would love this to be like a trigger for the industry to think about identity, as we've talked about a lot, but also about payments. And I think I'm not a Taylor Swift mega fan. I wasn't trying to buy tickets for Taylor Swift, but I was trying to buy tickets for Glastonbury. And the main issue seemed to be there around like the authentication of payments. And I feel like we don't, as an industry, think about different types of payments. We try and treat all payments as the same, and we try and process them all in the same way. Whereas actually, I do think, and we see from customers, there's a difference between sort of spontaneous payments that you want to just make instantly, you don't want to plan for, and you're happy to kind of go through this more complex authentication process in the moment, versus payments that you can anticipate a long way in advance, where, like, as you talked about, maybe there could be a different process for you to pre-store that money, pre-upload that money, attach that money to an account, or to pre-authenticate in different ways, so that you have real confidence that in that moment when you just want to press buy, but nothing's going to break. And I'd like to see us think as a whole a bit more about like the different nuances of payments.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think we've rolled back to our jobs to be done kind of approach. Right? We're not trying to buy a ticket. We're trying to go to a concert. That's a different problem, right? The whole thing in between is a mess. So how does the industry actually fulfills the mission of having people to go to a concert and experience a great show is what I think needs to be solved.
Okay. Sadly, we're coming to the end of the show. We've run out of time. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Where can people find out a bit more about you guys? Maurício first.
I'm on Twitter, 0x Maurício, on LinkedIn, Maurício Magaldi, and obviously 11fs.com.
David?
Check me out on LinkedIn at DavidBG.
Awesome. And as for myself, you can find me on LinkedIn at Kate Moody or on Twitter at K8.Moody. Right, that's all we have time for this week, sadly. Make sure you follow 11FS on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram and TikTok to stay updated with all the cool stuff that we're doing. And if you enjoy our show, please do subscribe to the 11FS YouTube channel, where you can also explore our one-to-one video series Spotlight and our in-depth Explores series, where we take mini deep dives into different topics in fintech, insurance and crypto without the jargon, so to help you expand your knowledge. Have a great week, everyone. Goodbye.